Amazon is changing Firesticks, and if you use Kodi, Stremio, or Sideload Android apps, buying the wrong model could be a mistake. Vega OS changes the rules, and there's a cheap alternative. But if you're outside America, that alternative has its own catch. How do we make sure we're not buying the wrong Firestick? Check this before buying. This is probably the most useful thing to remember from this video. Don't just look for the words Fire TV Stick. Check the exact model name. The Fire TV Stick 4K Select runs Vega OS. The newer 2026 Fire TV Stick HD also runs Vega OS. By comparison, Amazon lists the 2025 Fire TV Stick 4K Plus as running Fire OS 8. And Amazon has made its direction clear. Starting with the Fire TV Stick 4K Select, future Fire TV Sticks are moving toward Vega OS. So if sideloading matters to you, don't assume that buying the newest Fire Stick means buying the best Fire Stick for your needs. It could mean exactly the opposite. Check the exact model, check the generation, and check which operating system it uses before paying. Two devices can carry almost the same Fire Stick name, while one small specification completely changes what you're able to do with them. And if that just stopped you from buying the wrong Fire Stick, that's exactly why subscribing matters. We find the small details that can completely change a purchase before you spend your money. Subscribe to Purchase Wisely New Tech. This isn't the first time we've found something like this. Apple has also made a major macOS change that could leave millions of older Macs behind. If you own a Mac, watch the link above after this video. But stay with us, because the Kodi and Stremio problem gets even more important from here, and whether the ONN 4K really solves the problem. Now let's understand why this matters. Fire OS was based on Android, and that Android foundation gave Fire Stick users something extremely valuable: flexibility. If a compatible Android application wasn't available directly through Amazon's App Store, users could often download the APK and install it manually. But Vega OS changes the foundation. Vega isn't simply Fire OS with a different looking home screen. It's a separate operating system with its own application architecture and ecosystem. So we can't simply take an Android APK and install it onto Vega as though nothing changed. Amazon does have development methods for testing Vega applications, but that's not the normal consumer Android APK sideloading experience we're talking about here. For everyday users, the important message is much simpler. The traditional Android APK sideloading method does not transfer to Vega OS, and this is where Kodi and Stremio come in. Let's make the distinction very clear. Vega is not Android. Think about what that means. Someone could replace an older Fire Stick because they want something newer and better, only to discover that their brand new device actually has less flexibility than the one they just replaced. That's not a small detail. For someone who relies on sideloading, a newer Fire Stick could actually feel like a downgrade, and that's exactly why the operating system matters more than the familiar name printed on the box. But now comes the obvious question. If sideloading matters, what do we buy instead? This is where the ONN 4K gets very interesting. The ONN 4K takes a very different approach. It runs Google TV, and underneath Google TV, we're still dealing with the Android TV ecosystem. That means compatible Android applications can still be installed. Kodi, Stremio, and other compatible Android apps. For someone who values sideloading and customization, that's a major advantage over Vega OS. And there's another reason the ONN has attracted so much attention: the price. It gives you 4K streaming, Google TV, and access to the Android ecosystem without demanding premium streaming box money. If all we want is Netflix, Prime Video, Disney+, YouTube, and other mainstream streaming services, Vega OS may be perfectly adequate. But if we're watching this video because the words "no sideloading" concern us, then the ONN becomes much more interesting. However, remember the catch we mentioned at the beginning? Here it is. If you're watching from outside the United States, don't immediately order an ONN 4K without understanding this. ONN streaming devices are primarily targeted at the US market, and US market ONN devices can encounter regional restrictions during initial setup outside their supported market. So if you're in Europe, the UK, Australia, Canada, or elsewhere, this is something to consider before importing one. But that doesn't necessarily mean the ONN is useless outside America. There is a workaround that users have successfully used. Without turning this video into a technical tutorial, it involves establishing a US VPN connection and sharing that connection through a correctly configured mobile or computer hotspot during the initial setup. Once successfully activated, users have reported being able to use their ONN devices outside the United States. But if we're comfortable dealing with that initial hurdle, the ONN remains a very interesting Firestick alternative. And speaking of alternatives, if Vega has made you reconsider Firestick completely, we've also looked at whether you should buy an Apple TV 4K now or wait for the next model. Open the link above and watch that one next. But stay with us for another moment, because we're about to make the Firestick versus ONN decision extremely simple. So let's make the decision simple. If we mainly use official streaming services, Netflix, Prime Video, Disney+, YouTube, and we don't care about installing Android APKs, a Vega OS Firestick may be perfectly suitable. But if sideloading is important, if Kodi is important, if Stremio is important, or if we simply want more control over what can be installed, then we need to think very carefully before buying a Vega OS Firestick. Check the exact model first. Fire TV Stick 4K Select, Vega OS 2026 Fire TV Stick HD, Vega OS, and expect Vega to become increasingly important across Amazon's future Fire TV Stick lineup. If we want to stay within the Android ecosystem instead, the ONN 4K becomes a compelling budget alternative, especially for buyers in the United States. So forget which device is newest, forget which one has the biggest discount. Ask one question: what can we actually do with it? If sideloading doesn't matter, Vega may be perfectly fine. If Kodi, Stremio, and Android APK flexibility matter, ONN or another Google TV device makes much more sense. If this video just stopped you from buying the wrong Firestick, subscribe. That's exactly what Purchase Wisely New Tech is here for, finding the catch before you spend your money.